The subtitle on this one is Bingurat. Now, some of you might recall the word gurut by chance, I hope. Fearful, gurdul, gurut, terrible. It's all related to the same concept. Gurat means fear. So, Bingurat is literally without fear, fearless. Right. The first thing I want to start with is a repeat of the exercises. Now, to be clear, there were two sets of main exercises here. So we had, as you can remember in our last session, we had a game where in case you ended up in the wrong location, you were requested to do some of these exercises. Right. So let's go through these. Again, I'll go a bit quicker. So the section A here, as section B, C, and D was to translate. So what we had here is, this is my friend, she's a dwarf. Ala bahaye tatia kust. Now, most of this was fine. Some of you that did this forgot that there's an interfix. So with an interfix, I mean, you cannot have two vowels in a row, right? With the exception of A and I, as we see in I. But normally you cannot have two vowels in a row. So if we have baha, which is friend, and then A, which is my, baha A is not possible. Baha ye is. So this is something that I think is in the post-class notes of lesson 2, if I'm not mistaken, where we cover this, where if your last vowel is a U, an O, it ends up with an interfix as which is a W, and if it's an A, an E, or an I, then it's a Y that we use. So bahaye, but for instance, kurdue, right? So keep that in mind. This is different from when a word ends with a glottal stop, right? Because then something happens which is called krasis, which means it eats up some of the vowels and only one remains, right? So, for instance, nana-e wouldn't be possible. It becomes nane because you have this glottal stop in the middle. So it's not like Hawaiian, for instance, where you comfortably can have two vowels on either side of your glottal stop. Or like other Semitic languages where this is also not an issue. Here it is, and it uses krasis, which is a fancy way of saying that it eats up certain vowels before that glottal stop and the glottal stop to, get your new result, if you will. Okay, next one. Good morning, Bilbo. Are you happy? That would be Bakan Galik Bilbo Sati Girul. Are you angry today? That is Satya Kuzrul Alanut. Alanurt. Don't forget also that you that we're asking for is a female version, right? So that's Satya, not Sati. Then your name is Gandalf, correct? Now, I think one person translated as Gandalf. I mean, it's fine. It's not really the end of the world, but his Dwarvish name is Tarkun, the staff man, if you will. Literally, that's what it means. Then, excuse me, is that my letter? That would be Birashagami, and then optional Tati. You don't really need to write it. It's you could just say Tadamane. So Birashagami Tadamane or Tati Tadamane. Right, so that was section A. Then moving on to section B. Lots of love, your, and then in this case, male singular, kind father. Amral Haga Adadzu Guluk. Next one. Her old school in Thorns Hall is beautiful. Finidia Gamil ni Torinuldum Tati Abnamul. Now, here I have not put Tati between brackets. It's an important distinction why that is the case. Because if we omit Tati here, the sentence becomes something else. Now it says her old school in Thorns Hall is beautiful. If we omit Tati, then it's her old school in beautiful Thorns Hall. That's not the same thing as Thorns Hall is beautiful. So, because then Abnamul becomes the adjective of torinoldum, right? So here we say torinoldum tati abnamul, which is Torrance Hall is beautiful. But if we say torinoldum abnamul, then it's beautiful Torrance Hall. Okay, so yes, I know it's a minor little detail, but if the sentence says or asks, her old school in Torrance Hall is beautiful, then we have to put Tati there, because otherwise it would translate as her old school in beautiful Torrance Halls, which is obviously not the same thing. Okay, then mother and father speak about her angry letter is Ahmad Ra'adat Taglibin. Note that we're using Taglibin, which is the male plural. Why? Because there's at least one male in this group of two, the father. And then Udu Manandia Khuzurul. Now, Udu, about, a lot of people translated about as Kama or Zai, I think. About is Udu. So, Uduhu, about it or about him. Ududia, about her, etc., etc. So this is one of those conjunctions that you can just add a pronoun to. A lot of them exist that way. Hey, Dies, did you speak with Borin today? Oita or oitarktir, Dies. Now, could you have said Shamuk? No, not really, not in this translation, because it's really hey. It's informal, right? If we say greetings or hail, then yes, you would have used Shamuk. But I can't count Shamuk as correct when I ask the translation hey, because hey is really in English informal, right? So oita or oitarktir dis saglibia zai borin alanurt. So speak with borin. So, and I think there's one more for section B. They, females, speak about two friendly hobbits. Is taglibi yan, and yan is needed here because it's the female plural. Udu malkan nu bahul. So, two friendly hobbits is hobbits two friendly. Why? Because it's noun, number, adjective. So it's what are we talking about with how many are they and what kinds. So what, how many, what kinds. That's always the order that we have when we're talking about nouns, numbers, adjectives. Right, that's section A and B. Moving on rather swiftly to C. I say that hobbits dwell in caves. Aglibi tada malkan tatmanin ni agar. Then the next one, your, and that's the male form. Cake is behind her long candles. So kasabzu, which is your, the male form. Tati, you could omit. You know, you don't really need it. Aktu dinakdia. Dinakdia is her candles. And then long sigin. So don't put the pronoun on the adjective. So it's not dinak sigindia, for instance. It's her candles that are long, right? So it's the sigin adjective is next to that noun. Right. Bats dwell in our house in the halls of Erebor. Now that seems quite a nuisance. Kafash tatmanin ni zaharma ni urdek. So kafash is the plural for bats. Tatmanin, they dwell, because it's more than one. And, you know, like these general forms are always going to be the male because, you know, one assumes that these bats are not all female. And, well, you don't need to even assume. If there's no confirmation that they are not, then it's the male. And that's as simple as that. So we can't know, so hence it's the male. So kafash tatmanin ni zaharma ni urdek. In the halls of Erebor. Right. Yes, two mines under Thorin's halls are very long. Kun atak nu undu torinuldum tatin sigin haga. So, yes, is kun atak to the mines, and then two in this case, atak nu undu torinuldum under Thorin's halls. Tatin, they are, we're talking about plural, mines. They are long, and they're not just normally long, they're very long. Sigin haga. So yeah, if it's very something, you just add haga behind whatever that adjective is. That's usually a good tip when it comes to adjectives. Now there is an order, and I posted a document on that I think 1 or 2 lessons ago, that the adjectives that are derived, which usually end with ul, go first and then the others after. So if you have several adjectives. But if it's an adjective that explains something more about a previous, another adjective, like very long. So this very tells you more about what this long is, right? Then that goes after it. So that's the concept there. Right, next one. How many are in front of my mind? Zur etarul. And actually, the etarul, there's a spelling mistake here I noticed, because the u, the accent needs to be on the a, not on the u. So I have to correct that one. Zur etarul tatin baru taikue. Now, this is, first of all, baru in front of, and then taikue. This is another interfix. So taiku ends with a u. It's my mine, so we cannot say taiku e. So we have to add this interfix here, which, because it's a u, will be the w. So there's only 2 interfixes. It's w or y. And if it's y, when it's a, e, or I, and if it's o or u, then it's w. So taiku we. Right, and then the last section, she says they have a friendly cave troll. Taglibia gairudur bahul duhun. If people had this one wrong, it's just putting duhun incorrectly. Now, in this case, I think this one is not that complicated, because there's no locative, there's no extra part of the sentence. So what you have is the duhun form will follow whatever it is that you have. So in this case, friendly cave troll, right? Gairudur bahul. That is the thing that they have. So then duhun follows that. So gairudur bahul duhun in this case. So, and it's duhun because it's they, the plural. My daughter has a kind and friendly child, would translate as nataye nadan guluk rabahul dudia. Again, kind and friendly child is what she has. So nadan guluk rabahul, and then she has will follow that, whatever it is that they have. So in this case, dudia, literally to her. No, 3 cups of coffee, please. Lu, sheluk kaf gem kasamhili. This is one of the things that I noticed in some of the exercises as well. You had to, in one of the optional exercises, you had to make a tavern menu with drinks and all that. And some people, when it's more than one, either omit sheluk. So that's important that you use that. It's 3 cups of something. So keep that in mind. Sheluk, kaf, gem, 3 cups of coffee. Right. My child, you have a lot. Translates as nadane haga duzi. Now we saw in previous lessons haga duzu, because in that case she was talking to a boy. Now in this case, clearly you female, so talking to a girl, then that would be duzi. Then the last one in this section, he is 100. He has a birthday today. Tati mihok, so not zemihok, because zemihok is 101. Inad nurt duhu ala nurt. So today is not part of what you have, right? He has a birthday. So what do you have? What does he have? A birthday. So that comes before duhu. The rest, in this case, ala nurt, does not, right? And then hence that goes after it. Okay, so these are a rather quick review of A, B, C, and D. Hope that should be clear. Now, there was another exercise which everybody needed to do, which was a comprehension exercise. So we had quite a few lines that you had to read, make sure that you understood, and then answer questions in Neo-Khuzdul. So we're going to go over those. So the first one was Ala Nurt Bahaye Tati Zaima. Zaima might have made a couple of you question what we're talking about here. We have seen it though, but kind of on the fly. Zai is with, ma is us or our, right? So alanurt bahaye tati zaima. I'm going to go through all of those and then we're going to try to do the translations. So this was the first line. Alanurt bahaye tati zaima. Zatat mani ni zaharu adade. Taglibi haga ududia nanahu. Zatatia gimom ni ayaras nu. Kazad etarul taglibin tada tatia amnamul. And then the last one, kaglibi tadaya. Okay, so anybody want to venture a guess here at the first line? Alanurt bahaye tati zaima. What does it mean? Today, my friend, in this case, he, right, is with us. So, alanurt bahaye tati zaima. Today, my friend, he is with us. Then, zatat mani nizaharu adade. So we noticed, or we learned in the previous lesson, that putting za in front of something, or in front of the verb to be exact, will give you the meaning of shall and will. So something shall or will happen, for instance. So that's what we get here with za. But the rest of the line, zatat mani nizaharu adade, how would we translate that? He will dwell in the house of my father. Then next one, taglibi haga ududia nanahu. Anybody want to give this one a try? He speaks a lot or much. I guess a lot would be a better translation. About his sister, right? Because we have about her, ududia, and then nanahu, his sister. Okay, moving along nicely here. Next one, zatatia gimom ni ayaras nu. Yep, she will be 80 in 2 years. So, Tatia, she will be. So, Tatia is she is, right? Because we add za, it's she will, and then obviously is changes to be in English, right? So, Tatia, she is, za, she will be, right? Gimom, 80. Ni ayaras nu, in 2 years. So ayaras is years, and then nu, so in 2 years. Next one, kazad etarul taglibin tada tatia abnamul. Yeah, many dwarves say that she is beautiful. So kazad, dwarves, etarul. So kazad etarul taglibin tada tatia abnamul. Many dwarves say that she is beautiful. And then the last one is a bit of a, trick one. I wouldn't say trick one, but we have seen za with the two examples before. So zatatmani, zatatia, she will be, he will dwell. Ka is the element that you normally add in front to say can. And that's what we see here as well. So kaglibi tada ya. What would that be? Kaglibi, I can speak, I can say, and then tadaya, that's too. That's also, right? I can say that too. Kaglibi tadaya. Right, so this is what it means. This was basically, if you read this, this is what should have popped up in your head eventually when you're going through this. This is the translation that should have popped up. Now, obviously, there were questions, so we're going to go through the questions that we have. So the questions are, ku tati zaima ala nurt. Other question is, kur zatat mani. Then, zur ayaras etaru tatia ala nurt. Kust ze taglibi tada tatia abnamul. And ku kataglibi tada ya. So the first one, ku tati zaima ala nurt. What does this question mean? Let's start with that. What does the question mean? Ku tati zaima ala nurt. Who is with us today? That is that question. So, and what would be the answer to that one? Bahaye, indeed. This one we see here as well. Kur zatatmani, where will he dwell? Now the next one. Zur ayaras etarul tatia alanurt. What does this mean? This line. Zur ayaras etarul tatia alanurt. Yeah. So how many years is she today? So literal or another way of saying that is how old is she today, right? Again, you don't always literally translate lines from one language to another. Literally, it says how many years is she today. But in English, you don't say how many years is somebody. You say how old are they, which means the same thing, obviously. So yes, then next one. Kustze taglibi tada tatia abnamul. What does this mean? What are we saying here? Kustze taglibi tada tatia abnamul. Yes, does one dwarf say that she's beautiful? It's kind of weird line, but I mean, it's just to see if, obviously, you're getting the concept here of what the lines were about. And then the last one, ku kataglibi tada ya. What would that be? Yep. Who can say that too? Who can also say that? Absolutely. Okay, so going through our answers. So the first one we already had, Bahaye, my friend. Then next one, Kur Zatatmani. Where will he dwell? What's the answer to that one? Yeah, so Nizaharu Adade in the house of his father, or my father to be exact. So Nizaharu Adade in the house of my father. Let's see, next one. Zur Ayaras Etarul Tatia Alanurt. How many years is she today? Now, if anybody had this, not a perfect score on this one, a lot of people did get a perfect score on these exercises. But if you didn't, you probably tumbled on this one, which is in our comprehension, it says Zatatia Gimon ni Ayaras Nu. She will be 80 in 2 years. The question is, how many years is she today? So if you know she's going to be 80 in 2 years, then she is Gimon Hadem, 78. Yep. So a lot of you had this one right, but if you tumbled on these exercises, it's probably on this line. So Gimon Hadem, 78. Then the last, no, not the last question, almost the last. Kustze taglibi tada tatia abnamul. Does one dwarf say that she is beautiful? What is our answer to that? Well, you could just say no. No, that's, you could just say that. We're going for a little bit of a longer option here, which is lu etarul taglibin tada. No, many say that, right? But yeah, no is a right answer. It's a bit of a short answer, but it's true. Etarul taglibin tada. No, many say that, or a lot of people say that. Right. Then the last question, kut kataglibi tadaya. Who can say that too? Yep. Kaglibi tadaya. Kaglibi tadaya. I can say that too. Now, one thing that I want to point out, which is a special thing in Neo-Khuzdul, which you don't really have in a lot of other languages. In English, if we say, who can say that, then you can simply reply with, I can, without using the verb. You don't have to say, I can say that. There's no need for that in English. You can simply reply with, I can. That's not an option in Neo-Khuzdul because ka needs to be added to your verb. So you cannot say simply ka ye, for instance, that because it doesn't link to a pronoun. You can only link it with your verb, right? So ka and za don't attach to words like hu, dia, e, and all of that. So you cannot say I can, and that's it. You have to attach that verb. So you have to say kaglibi, I can say that, or kaglibi tada, right? So that's a bit of a thing you need to keep in mind, that literal translations from English don't always work. You need that verb in Neo-Khuzdul to emphasize that you can't just say I can or I will, right? You will say I can say, or I will drink, or I will eat, or whatever, but the verb needs to be there, right? So keep that in mind. Right, then time for diving into the rest of the session, which is a lot that's going to be coming. So here we go. Haburma, let us listen.
Lo ati damil rabin buha. Ne sadlibitada. Ne kikun sadlibi zutada odowe. Lu tadlibi zutada mir. Buha mabak duo. Lu zamahbari. Lu kamahbari. Lu ati numihok. Ati zul therthagem zenihok.
Right. We're gonna listen to it once more. Try to pick up on any words. I'm not asking you if you understood the whole thing, obviously not, but try to pick up on a couple of words. You probably heard a few that you recognize. Let's listen to it again.
Lo ati damil rabin buha. Ne sadlibitada. Ne kikun sadlibi zutada odowe. Lutadlibi zutada mir. Buha mabak duo. Lu zamahbari. Lu kamahbari. Lu ati numihok. Ati zul therthagem zenihok.
Right. Now, anybody want to take a wild guess at any of the things that were said here before we dissect the whole thing? That's true. There's a lot of numbers in there, and there's a lot of no in there. That's true. We're going to dive into it again, and I'm going to play it. And while we play it, I will drop in the lines, and you can see what it's all about. So let's go for that.
Lo ati damil rabin buha. Ne sadlibitada. Ne kikun sadlibi zutada odowe. Lutadlibi zutada mir. Buha mabak duo. Lu zamahbari. Lu kamahbari. Lu ati numihok. Ati zul therthagem zenihok.
There we go. So what we have here is negation. That's basically what we're talking about here. So we have no, not, without, don't, never, should, won't, can't, not, only, no. So these are the things that we're focusing on, negatives. So let's listen to it one more time.
Lo ati damil rabin buha. Ne sadlibitada. Ne kikun sadlibi zutada odowe. Lutadlibi zutada mir. Buha mabak duo. Lu zamahbari. Lu kamahbari. Lu ati numihok. Ati zul therthagem zenihok.
Right, so let's start with the first one. Here, it's important that we see the difference between no and not. So, lu, with the glottal stop at the end, you already know that this means no. Right, lu is no, lu is not. Okay, so lu ati, I'm not. Lu ati. In this case, lu ati gamil rabin buha. I'm not old and without friends. So we saw at the beginning of the lesson, bin gurat, fearless, right? When I said bin here is without fear. So bin buha, without friends. So lu ati gamil rabin buha. I'm not old and without friends. Ne saglibitada. Don't you say that. So ne, you see the next line as well. Ne kikun saglibi zutada uduwe. So ne means don't. Kikun means ever. So ne kikun, don't ever, which is never, right? So don't ever, never, or just ne, don't. Now, sometimes you will see that kikun is just omitted, specifically when you use words like zud, should. So ne can mean don't, but it could also mean never. If you want to explicitly say never, you say ne kikun, right? But you can omit kikun if it's fairly obvious. So don't, should you say that about me, would be never say that about me, or never should you say that about me. So hence the kikun between brackets, like it's an option, right? So ne kikun saglibi zud tada uduwe. Now about this element zud. So zud means should or must or ought to, right? If it's we have to do it, we should do it, we must do it, we ought to do it. If it's that kind of should, then you have to put it behind your verb. And if it's a conditional should, like, should we go to the dance? Yes or no. Should we have another beer? Yes or no. That's a conditional should. Then you put it in front of your verb. Then it would be should you speak? Then it would be zud saglibi. Or you should speak, you have to speak, you must speak, then it's saglibi zud. So if you put zud after your verb, like in this case, saglibi zud, right? It is the meaning is experience. So which means it has to happen, it should happen, it must happen, it ought to happen. In this case, we're negating it. So it should not happen, it must not happen, it ought not happen, right? So that's the meaning of it then. The experience is still there. It's just negative experience. It's still a matter of we have to do it, but in this case, we must not do it. We ought not to do it. We should not do it. So it's not conditional. It's not like, should we not do it? Yes or no? That's not it. That's not, it's not a question or anything like that. So yes, this is experience, but negative experience. But the logic behind it remains the same. If something is experience, should, must, ought to, whether it's positive or negative, then you have to put zud behind your verb. And if it's conditional, is it yes or no? That kind of thing. Are we having another drink? Should we have another drink? Yes or no? Then you put it before your verb. So, lu taglibin zud tadabir gives you another of those examples. So, no is lu with the glottal stop, but not is lu. Lu taglibin means not say. So, they should not say. Lu taglibin zud. Again, this is not conditional, right? This is a experience. They must not, they should not, they ought not do that. Now, the next one also translates as no in English, but to be honest, this is more of a quantity. So, buha mabak duhu. Mabak, you might remember as the word for zero, right? So he has 0 friends, literally. He has no friends. So if it's a quantity that we're saying no, right? So we have no chisels. We have no mountains in the Shire. If it's a quantity, like you can replace this no with the word 0, then it's mabak. So buha mabak duhu, he has no friends. Again, in English, you use no for that, but that's quantitative, so it's mabak, which is literally means 0. Then lu za mahbari. So mahbari is the verb listen, right? We'll see that later. Lu za mahbari. The za we saw in previous lesson is will or shall, right? If we negate that, then we have lu za mahbari. So we will not listen. So we won't listen. That's what it means. So will not, shall not is won't, right? So we will not listen, we won't listen. Then, and the mahbari, the M, by the way, indicates that we're talking about we, which we've seen in other verbs as well. So lu ka mahbari is basically the same thing. We cannot listen, we can't listen, right? So lu negates it, then ka is the can element. Lu ati numihok, I'm not 200 years old. So lu ati, just like in the first line, I am not. Then ati izul, I am only, izul only, which is derived, by the way, from the word for ze, which is one, right? Ze, only, izul. I am only 199 years old, only. Okay, so going through these, so no is lu, and mind the glottal stop at the end, lu. Then there is also lu, which is not. There's alternatives that you might see sometimes for lu, but they are what I consider archaic, which means that you would find them in long gone poems and stuff like that, but not in everyday conversational stuff, which is, there's 2 of them, ma and lo. Ma is what is used for verbs, and lo is what is used for adjectives. So, for instance, lo gamil, not old, or ma saglibi, you don't say, right? Or you're not saying. That's basically it. So again, these are alternatives for lu, but just you can omit those, forget those. It's just for your information. The one we're using is lu, which is the contemporary form, not ma or lo, which is the split form, one for verbs, one for adjectives. Then, without, bin. So we have an example here, bin duha. We also had bin gurat, fearless. So bin literally is without, but we'll see in a minute, it has a lot of other sub-meanings in English. Don't is ne. Then we could say nekikun, which is never, don't ever, literally. Then zud, and I put the little red dot in front of it. The red dot indicates the verb. So should, must, ought to. If it's experience, if it's something that has to happen, then you put zud behind your verb. If it's conditional, yes or no kind of thing, then you put zud in front of it. Only, izul. Then no or none, right? Mabak. Nor is relo. And you have not yet as well, which is lona. Now, relo actually comes from ra, ya, lo. So I mentioned earlier that lu has an archaic form, which is lo for adjectives, right? So re, ya, lo, which is and also not, literally. And also not, which is nor. And also not basically means nor. So relo comes from ra, ya, lo. So relo and also not, which means nor. Then you have lo, na. Lo, again, is kind of a wink to that archaic form of lu for the adjective. So lo and na means yet. So lo na is literally not yet. I'd say that's a rather comprehensive list of negations that you could be using and that we will be using going forward. And it does expand your potential lines tremendously. Right. Before we start using a couple of examples here, I want to dive in with some new verbs in this lesson. So we had verbs like taglibi and tatmani. Now, you might notice that one of them has a form that includes an I in the middle, while the other one has an A in the middle. Tatmani, taglibi. Right? This is not a coincidence. There's the forms that we've seen so far as what we call imperfect. We'll see that later, what it means in more depth. But there are two kinds of imperfect verbs. One of them have an I in the middle and the other ones have an A in the middle. Now, sadly, this is one of those things that, like, for instance, in French, where you need to remember when a verb ends with ER, RE, and etc., etc., here you need to remember, is it an A or is it an I? There's two groups. There's the A type, there's the I type. And honestly, you know, once you say taglibi and aglibi and maglibi and all of that so many times, you know it's not with an A. You know, I need to force myself to say taglaba or I can't even say it. It's taglibi. It's not taglabi. It wouldn't make sense to my ears. So this is something that you will pick up as you go along. What is with an A? What is with an I? But why am I saying this now? Because we're going to see two new ones with A and two new ones with I. So let's go over these. So the A ones, tahbari, to listen. We saw it in a minute ago, mahbari. And then we have tazrali, to want. That is like conjugated like tatmani, right? So if you look at that, the TA in front, right? That's your third person. And then I at the end, that's always the same. What it ends with, what it starts with is the same. Now, the core of this, in this case, bar, zral, tman, these things, they have one vowel, and that vowel is an A. Now, if we look at the other side, as we saw with taglibi, right? You have verbs like to ask, taziri, to buy, tabkimi, and like we saw before, taglibi. So what's the difference here? The difference is that there's an I as vowel in this core, right? The conjugations aside, and with conjugations, I mean the stuff that you put in front of or at the back which is the actual conjugation, that stays the same. It's what's that core. The only little thing I want to kind of point at is Taziri has two consonants in its core, right? While the rest of them have three. If you can see, Bar, Zral, Bikim, Tman, Glib, those are three. Taziri, by the way, is linked to the word for how, so which is zur, by the way. So let's go over the conjugations based on what we know from Tatmani and Taglibi, right? So if I want to say I, then for instance, Atmani or Aglibi. So what we have here is it starts with an A, ends with an I, and then we put whatever this base in between. So the base could be Glib, could be Tman, could be Zir, could be Bikim. That base is what you put in the middle. Now, we're going to do the same with all the other forms. These, you've seen these. So U male starts with an S, A, and then ends with an I. Then with the female, ends with Ia. Then the third person, they start with T's, same thing. Male form ends with an I, female form ends with Ia. Then we, pretty much the same as your first person singular, I am, but then you add an M in front of it. So ma. Then the plurals, you take the standard form and then you add an N. In the case of the males, you also extend that I. In females, you just add an N. And as we've seen with the third person, it's basically the same as with the second person. So it's the same as the U forms, if you will. The only difference is that it starts with a T instead of an S, right? So this is what you've seen with Taglibi, with Tatmani, right? If we want to say we dwell, Matmani. So we put that Tman core, we shove that in that we form. That's what you would get. So let's try a couple of things here. If we want to say she wants, how would we say that? She wants. Yes, and why is that? Because the she form starts with TA and then ends with ia, and then we know the core is ZRAL, Zral, so Tazralia, she wants. Once you know those cores, and the cores can either be with an A or an I, you can't really do a lot wrong here as long as you know what what consonants are used, right? If you know the core, then you can basically create whatever verb you want. You know the core, the conjugations, then you're set. If we want to say we ask, what would that be? Maziri, yes. Because we have, the verb is taziri, right? That's the verb, which is basically the third person he, it form, always, right? That's what we say is the verb. So if you know that taziri is the third person form and you look between he, it, starts with TA and then ends with I, and then we look at we, then the only difference between those two forms is the one starts with a T and the other one starts with an M. That's the only difference. So if you know it's taziri, he, it asks, then maziri is we ask. Simple as that. So again, conjugation is what we're seeing is the conjugation of what is known as the imperfect. Again, we'll go into detail what that exactly is used for, because we've used it for pretty much everything till now, which is fine. But again, remember that there's two cores. There's the A core, there's an I core, and half of the verbs are on one camp, half are in the other camp. That's pretty much it. And we're, the examples that we are learning now, we know Tatmani, we know Taglibi, but we're also going to learn Taziri, Tapkimi, and Tahbari, and Tazrali. Well, there are. Tati is actually an irregular verb, because if you look at Tati, that has an extended vowel on, TA, it's not your normal TA, it's a T extended A. So in a way, that's kind of weird. It's not Tati, it's Tati, right? So ati itself, all of those forms are irregular in a way because they don't follow this conjugation structure perfectly. Almost, but not entirely, because your first vowel is extended on that verb. Another one, which is completely irregular because it's not really a verb, is to have. As you've seen, the do-who forms have nothing to do with this. They don't follow that at all. Then you have two very special verbs, linked to have. You have ganara, which is but then we're, kind of moving into a different tense, which is the perfect. But anyway, there are irregular verbs. Not that many, though, but there are. Right. Let's try a couple of things. So what I've done here is I put up on the board there, taziri to ask, tahbari to listen, tabkimi to buy, tazrali to want. Right. I've put that there so that you don't need to know it by heart now. I don't expect you to know this by heart at this point because I've just introduced them to you. But I do expect that you already know what the conjugation is of things like tati and things like taglibi and tatmani, right? Because we've seen that before. So with that knowledge in mind, and then with those new verbs, let's try a couple of lines. So ahbari, I listen, right? Let's try the next one together. Tapkimiya, what would that be? Tapkimiya. She buys. Yep, she buys. So tapkimiya, again, iya already indicates that it's a female, right? Then you just need to define, is it the third person or second? So is it he, she, it, or is it you? Now, it starts with a T, so third person. That's always a way I remember it, at least back in the day. Then S would be second person, so you, right? So tapkimiya is she buys. Right, next one. Mazrali. Yup, we want. And tazirian. They ask, the female they, to be exact. Yes, so they ask. So tazirian is indeed they, female ask. Then the next one is apkimi. Yup, I buy. So again, think of aglibi, I speak, atmani, right? I dwell. So it's the same form. The only thing we do is this bekim section, this core, this roots core, if you will, of the verb is entered. And the conjugation itself does not change. So indeed, I buy. Maziri. What is maziri? Yep, we ask. So again, taziri, is he or it asks, right? Maziri is what you would use this element, this M element for the we form. So maziri is we ask. Tapkimi. But tapkimi is he or it buys. If it's female, she buys, then tapkimiya. And if it's they, the females buy, tapkimiyan. And if it's they, the males buy, it's tapkimin. Right. Sahbaria. Sahbaria. Yes. So you, the female, listen. So again, S indicates that we're talking about the second person, which in English translates as you. Several you forms are possible. It's you male, you female, you male plural, or mixed group plural, that's also male, or plural you all female, that's also a possibility. Now in this case, we don't see an N here in the end. If there's no N at the end, it's not going to be a plural second person. It's impossible. So sahbaria is you, the female singular, listen. Right. A bit, going on to the next level here. I want a friend. Anybody want to give this one a go? I want a friend. Azrali Baha. So Azrali is I want. Because Tazrali, we basically murdered this T in front of your, because that's the I form. So Azrali. And then Baha is friend. Right. We're going to do a couple of these together. So I will ask my mother. So first of all, I ask. So if we see to ask is taziri. So I ask is going to be aziri, right? Then I will ask. So will is za. So aziri becomes zaziri. I will ask. Then my mother. Mother is Ahmad. And then my is Amade. So turns into Zaziri Amade. So because we have Aziri, I ask, I will ask, Zaziri, and then Amade, my mother. Her father listens. Adadia tahbari. Okay, tahbari is the infinitive form, if you will. I always hesitate to call it the infinitive form because there's also an actual infinitive form in Neo-Khuzdul, which is something else. But tahbari, so he or it listens, and we're talking about her father. So adad dia tahbari. Next one, can you, and we're talking about one guy, can you buy it? So let's start with you buy. So tapkimi becomes sapkimi, right? Because it's you, the male form. You, so sapkimi, but it's buy it. So how do we say you buy it? Well, you guys were nearly there. So kasapkimi is correct. However, there's still this it that needs to be translated, right? So we add that. So can you buy it? We're talking about 4 words in English. Turns into a sausage of a Neo-Khuzdul word all in one. So ka is can. Sapkimi is you buy. And then it, who. So kasapkimi hu is can you buy it? Kasapkimi hu? Can you buy it? This is one of the, in my opinion, and some people find this very weird, but in my opinion, that's the most beautiful things in Neo-Khuzdul. You have lines in English which look like a freight train, and this is an elegant form in one word. I mean, as they say in French, chapeau. Nicely done. Right, next one. I won't ask them. So, I ask. Let's start with that. I ask. What is I ask? Aziri. So aziri, because we know taziri is to ask, or he or it asks, right? So aziri is I ask. Now, I won't ask. I will not ask. So what we're translating here is the following. Because it's lu is the not that we've seen in our previous slide. So lu. But we said it's aziri, but it's also I will not. Will not. I won't. Won't is basically will not, right? So I won't. I will not. So this will element is za. Will or shall is za. So lu zaziri, but then you have to ask them. So you have to add that as well. So that's hun. So lu zaziri hun. I won't ask them. So that's basically what, or I will not ask them. That's what it means. Right. She doesn't listen. So let's start with she listens. Let's start with that. What is she listens? Tahbariya. All right. So tahbariya is she listens. So she doesn't listen. Here we use ne. Now we've seen ne means don't. It could also mean never. If we say ne kikun, don't ever. Right. So it means don't. But doesn't is just a conjugation of don't, really. I mean, I don't, she doesn't, he doesn't, right? We don't. It's the same thing. It's just another another form, right? So she doesn't is she don't listen, right? So I know this is weird English, but you get my point here. So ne means don't or doesn't, right? So she doesn't listen, ne tahbariya. Right, the next one. We only buy candles. Can anybody remember what the word only is? I know you just saw it like a slide ago, but... Yep, izul, only. So, we buy, let's go with that. We buy, what is we buy? Mapkimi. Yes. So remember, he or it buys is tapkimi. That T, we cut that T off. We don't keep it. So we change that with the M. So mapkimi is we buy. So, but it's we buy, we only buy. Now, this is one of the things, if it's an adverb, you place it behind your verb. So mapkimi izul, we only buy. Think of it like things like milmal, the adverbs that we've seen before, zimral and all of that. We put it behind our verb. Same thing with izul, right? Mapkimi izul, we only buy. And then what is it we buy? Candles, dinak. So mapkimi izul dinak. We only buy candles. Okay, then the next one. You never ask me. So let's start with you ask, because that's basically what we start with. You ask. So what would you ask? And then you, specifically the male singular form. What would you ask be? Saziri. Yeah. So saziri is you ask. And then never. We saw never in the previous slide. What is never? Nekikun. So nekikun saziri. You never ask. But then there's also this element me. So we need to add that to saziri. So saziri and then a. What do you think is going to happen there? Yay, bingo, nicely done. So, nekikun saziriye. Why? Because otherwise we have a collision of two vowels. So, saziri ends with an I, and then a, me, my, this element that we add is going to clash with that I at the end of saziri. So, we have to have that interfix. And in this case, that is indeed correct. That interfix is the letter Y because it ends in an I. So, nekikun saziriye, you never asked me. Right, next thing, completely different now. A bit of fun. Fun with flag. No, not with flags, with colors. Okay, labiri ramik, the fourth section here, is all about ankad, color. Or to be exact, anakad, colors. So, we're going to go through the colorful nukta world here of Dwarvish colors. First, the general ones. So, tahaf is yellow. Katad, orange. Kamar, brown. Narag, which is an original Tolkien word, by the way, is black. Baraz, another original Tolkien word, is red. Then we have barat, zabal, kagal, blue. And then light blue, I think in the dictionary it's mentioned as sky blue. Kalat, right? So kagal is darker blue, and then kalat is sky blue. Then danak is green. Tafar, which, kind of might ring a bell, is gray. Then labam is white. Now, these are just general colors, right? Their form is pretty much standards, which means it's just your radicals, so the consonants, with A's in the middle, A's in between them, right? So baras, barat, sabal, kagal, kalat, danak, it's all the same sound that you're hearing. It's all A's, right? Now, there are a couple of exceptions, which is silver colored is zigil. And then you have ziris, which is gold colored. Now, do not confuse these with kibil, which is the metal silver, or with kidis or biris, which is related to gold as the metal. There's a whole explanation what the difference is between kidis and biris. So those are specifically for those. They have a different form. Now, what also has a different form if we're talking about hair, whether that's on the top of your head or your beard. But in this case, giving you that example, tahaf is yellow, blonde, tihif, brown hair or brunettes or whatever you want to call them, kimir, brown hair, kamar, just brown. Nirik would be black, then biris, red hair, then kigil, blue hair. You're probably thinking, okay, blue hair, really? Well, yes, Dwalin in Tolkien's books has blue hair. Whether he means black with a blue shine or actually blue hair, we don't know. but hence we've included it. Kigil is blue hair. I always think it's black with a blue shine, like really, really black, where you kind of, in the light, kind of looks a bit blue. But hey, that's just my guess. Right. One that we've already seen is Tifir. You might remember Tifir from Gandalf, where we, I think in lesson 1 even, we talked about Tark Tifir, right? The gray beard. Libim is then white hair. And note, it's not kitid. It's not, there's no such thing as orange here. It's biris. So whether it's a dark red or a light red, doesn't really matter. Whether it's, when we're talking about hair, so ginger, it's biris. The shade of red doesn't really matter. It's biris. Right. Then let's combine this with a couple of things. So this here is a Raban Ze Kamar. So one brown table. So what would these be? I added the table. What would that be? So that one table is Raban Ze Kamar. How do we say 2 tables? 2 brown tables. Yep. Rabban. Note, there's a tiny little micro pause between those because we're doubling that middle letter. So Rabban becomes Rabban. Rabban Nu Kamar. So 2 brown tables. Okay, we have what? Well, let me ask the question. What do we have here? How would you translate that, if you will? Zahar, Gem, and then the color, Barat. Barat is pink. So 3 pink houses. So Zahar, Gem, Barat. Right. Okay, what is this, guys? Anybody remember the word for hand? Here we go. I was looking for the translation to pop up. Radhuk. Radhuk is hand, right? I know it's one of the weirdest written words because it seems to be lacking quite a few vowels, but Radhuk is hand. Radhuk ze kagal. So hand, 1, blue. Now, you may have noticed that the colors are treated like an adjective, right? So what we had is noun, number, adjective. So what is it? With how many? What kind? And that what kind also applies to color. So what kind? Well, brown, pink, or the blue kind. So Radhuk se kagal, hand, 1 blue hand. And I've put the link there, or the word Duradhuk next to, it literally means to the hand. Right? Next to the side literally means to the hand. Duradhuk. Right. Well, we've added 1 more. What would that then be? That's a bit of a trick question. Well, Rathak is hands. And that's why I said it's a trick question. So Radhuk, 1 hand. Then Rathak, hands. So Radhak, Nu Kagal. So with the other ones, we duplicate. So Rabban becomes Rabban. Zahar becomes Zahar. Radhuk becomes Radhak. That's just the plural. Right. Oh, no, there's 1 more thing. The words for light and dark. So lakad is light. Dush is dark. So dush and lakad. Dark and light. And then related to dark and light, the word for pale is also related to the word for white. So you see labam is white, libim is white hair, and lubma is pale. Okay, so that's all, as you can see, the LBM words there, all the same. So douche, dark, lakad, light. Okay, that's it on colors. A bit more information going back to our negations about bin, without. So, bin is used in adjectives and translates as un, for instance, unattractive, inappropriate, disenchanted, immoral, or just not, like not nice. So these are all examples in English where you would use bin in Neo-Khuzdul. So whatever can be translated as without something. So unattractive without attractiveness, inappropriate without being appropriate, etc., etc. So in English, you have all of these words that kind of, or prefixes that evolved naturally because of the mixture of, well, Norman French and Germanic and so forth. But in this case, we don't have this natural translation or evolution in language in Neo-Khuzdul. Neo-Khuzdul was created by Mahal, their creator. It is a constructed language, even in the world of Middle Earth. It is made 99% set in rules, and that little bit that it changes, Tolkien himself says, it changes in compared to the languages of men. It changes like, the weathering of rock compared to the changing of snow, or the melting of snow. That's what he says. So it changes almost nothing in its course. So it's normal to have these forms, while in English you don't have 5, 6 different things to kind of tell you the same thing. That's language evolution, I guess. Right, let me give you a couple of examples here. So soft is bulum. If we say not soft, we could say bin bulum, without softness, if you will, without soft, or lubulum, not soft, right? So you could use bin to also indicate not, but in most cases it just means without this, right? So lu or lu is not, then guluk is kind, bin guluk, unkind, right? This is how you would translate it in English, unkind. Galik, can anybody remember what galik is? Yep, good. So bin galik would then translate as unwell. I know it's English. What can I say? Ungood. No, that doesn't exist in English. Anywho, then bahul. Anybody remember bahul? Friendly, indeed, friendly. So bin bahul is unfriendly. Then we have buzra, like in the name for Rivendell. Anybody remember what that element means, buzra? It's deep cleft of the dale. That is literally what it means. And buzra is the first element, so it's deep. So buzra is deep. Think of the word bizar is dale, right? Uses the same letters, BZR. So valley is something which is deeper than the surrounding area, right? So the word bizar means it is deeper than the surrounding area. So buzra is deep. So this all related to the same thing. So bizar, buzra, one way of kind of remembering which is which. So buzra is deep. So bin buzra would be undeep or shallow, you could say as well. Gedul. Anybody remember what gedul is? Happy. Yep, happy. So bin gedul is unhappy. Bahir, we haven't seen bahir, I think. Bahir means wise. So bin bahir is unwise. This is, in general, if you can translate it with, in English, starting with un, in, dis, im, or not, then you could use bin, though not usually you would use lu. So lu bulum means not soft. Bin bulum is kind of like without anything, without softness. Makes it a bit more extreme, perhaps. I don't know. But just saying, yeah, bin is a bit more, it covers a lot more ground than un or in or dis or im or, than all of those separate elements. Right, okay, so then the last thing for this session is the question words. Now, we've seen a few of them, but I want to go through these to kind of, expand your vocabulary a little bit so that you can mold and create more lines as you go along. So let's have a look at these. So some of these you already know. Let's start with what. Does anybody remember what is? So yeah, could is indeed what. Then who or whom? What would that be? Ku. Yep, ku, with that little glottal stop at the end. Ku. Then where? Kur. Yep. Now notice that I put the who and ku. So who, although you write it with no, the sound is kind of similar to ku. Then where, kur. Kind of one way of remembering it. Now, what and could, I mean, TD is close, it's not the same thing, so I can't really put it in red there, but might help. Then let's look at the next ones. When. The next one is tan. That doesn't start with a K. So, but it does end with the same letter. So when is tan. Then how. Zur. Sadly, not something I can link with a letter somehow. How and zur. And why and wherefore. Why and wherefore. That's kuf. I just added wherefore so that, there's at least some link to the word. But yeah, wherefore, it's kind of ancient English, I guess. Why, wherefore, kuf. Then which or that which is kudze. Now, one thing about kudze, literally, now if you know that kud means what and ze is one, literally it means what one. So if you have to pinpoint one out of a series, right? Now, what I want to point out here, which is important about kudze, it doesn't function exactly the same as the word which in English. It translates as which, but there's a twist. So let me explain. So only when asking for information about one or more people or things from a definite set of things would you be using kudze. So, for instance, in English, which, the word which can act as what they call a determiner. So which way is the wind blowing? You will determine, the direction of the wind. So in Neo-Khuzdul, that's not how you use the word which. You would use what in that case. What, you would use the word kud. So if you say which way is the wind blowing, in English, you see, okay, the word which is used. So you'd think, okay, we're going to use kudze here. No, because when you use it as the question to a myriad of things, not a definite set of things, then you use what in Neo-Khuzdul. So in English, you distinguish between which is a choice from a limited known set, and what, which is open and defined. So both can appear in the phrase which or what way, depending on context, really. So could is always used for open-ended, undefined options. So even if English might use which, you will use what for those open-ended, undefined options. So it's not like a set of things. Then kudze is restricted for selecting specific things. So one of a series of specific things. So known items, people or things in a defined set. So let me give you an example here. If we say which table is ours, so we're in a room, we're looking at all of these tables, we are choosing from a known set of tables, right? We know exactly, roughly, how many tables are in this room, and we are choosing one of this set of tables. In this case, you indeed use kudze. Which one? What one of this set? Kudze. Kudze raban tatima. Which table is ours, right? Kudze raban tatima. Which tables is ours? We're choosing from a known set of tables, right? Now, if we say which way is it running, for instance, this is not a known set. We're not choosing from a known or limited ways of running. So if this is not a set, then we have to say what. Then we have to say kud. So kud turku tapsiniti. So which way is it running? Kud is then used because it's not a limited set. It's not a defined set. So this is a bit different than you would say in English, right? Which way is he running? You could also say what way is he running? But you don't have that flexibility in Neo-Khuzdul, right? In Neo-Khuzdul, if it's a defined set, you're going to use kudze for which. If it's not a defined set and it's kind of open fields, could be anything, right? then you're going to use could what. So I've noted this, by the way, in your lesson notes. This is explained pretty much the same way I just explained it. Another thing here on these question words, the word tan can also mean while. So you could use tan as both when and while. So just saying. Then that would do it for today. I know it's been a bit of a heavy session. We had new verbs, negation, colors, question words, but I think we handled it pretty well, to be honest. These are tools that let you build, in my opinion, a lot more flexible sentences. So knowing how to negate and then knowing all of those question words. I mean, the colors is like nice, but it's not essential, but still. So if things feel a bit overwhelming at this point, I think it's normal because we just had 4 new verbs. But again, it's new verbs and it's not new verbs because we know the conjugations. And now we know the logic that it's either a verb with an I in the middle or an A in the middle. That's pretty much it. So once you know that variation, it opens up again a whole new world there. But if it's overwhelming, I'd say, I mean, this is just one of those lessons where the review does a lot of work. So it's really important that you read it again, that you listen to the audio fragment, repeat the colors, go through them, fill in the exercises, and again, practice with those flashcards. Can't say it enough. And then also do the exercises. Talking about exercises, there is this bit of a different one. Normally, we've done like complete translations of lines. Now you're going to get a section of the line. So you're going to get the English, then the translation, but a part of the translation is missing. And you're going to have to add what is missing. So that's the exercise for this week. The post-class folder, by the way, has 2 optional exercises, not 1. So there is sounds practice, which is the difficult words in Neo-Khuzdul, how to pronounce them correctly. That's the sound practice. And then there's the voice acting part. So there's 2 optional exercises. Again, you don't need to do them. But even doing one of them will, in my opinion, or could, in my opinion, improve your pronunciation notably. If you're behind, by the way, on the exercises, on some of the content, please don't rush it. I know there's a tendency to do that, but try to return to those areas when you have the time, and especially those that you feel you're not solid on. If you're still having problems with the to-have forms and all of that, have a look at it. If you're still mixing up where to put an adjective, have a look at that. You know, noun, number, adjectives, or whatever it may be. Have a look at those documents. The post-class documents contain a lot of information. Reading through them once or twice could really help solidify that information in your head, and it's important. That would be it for this week. Right, then have a great week, guys. Practice a little every day, I would say. And I will see you all in the next lesson. If you have questions, then you know where to find me. Zan en Galik.